So your partner calls you over, you answer the phone, and he asks you to come over, or she asks you to come over, and you agree. There you are, all ready and prepped, and you go over to their place. They want to do the do, and you probably don't want to do the do. And then the big altercation happens. Are you going to do it? Are you not going to do it? How are you going to let them know that you are not interested at that particular time to engage sexually with them? This is what we are talking about today: sex and consent, sexual consent. We're going to cover every aspect on it, what it is, how it should be done, and what happens should that right be violated, because sex is a pleasurable right. You have to give someone the permission to do the things that you want them to do to you. Now, I'm not going to be talking all by myself like always. I am going to be having a guest. We've got Memory Kadau, who is the co-director of Adult Rape Clinic. She's an activist and a development practitioner with 10 years experience. We're going to discuss all things to do with sex and consent. Now, will you allow me and you to discuss this topic? I'm seeking your consent. We'll be right back. Check it out. She is a development practitioner with 10 years experience, also the co-director of Adult Rape Clinic. Her name is Memory Kadau. Memory, welcome to the Naked Truth Show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Are you about to unpack your mind for us today?
Yes.
And get naked. Like, people just need to know. People just
the
need to know.
The nakedness part is what I like. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, it's already interesting. Memory, can you let me know, what is a development practitioner? What is it that you do?
So what I do is, interesting. That's really an interesting question. But mainly if you trace my career and my journey in terms of in development work, I have always been passionate about social justice. So in a way, I call myself a social justice activist and a development practitioner, mainly interested in the development of our communities and position of women in our societies. That's where, the social justice activist comes from. I have, in terms of my journey, I've walked throughout from doing governance and democracy work.
Okay.
Interested about issues of accountability, transparency, how our institutions and how our government is governed, and issues of human rights, protection and promotion of human rights in Zimbabwe. Then I went into the transition of doing women's rights work, because that's my passion.
You are very busy.
Yes. But there's definitely an interconnection of, issues throughout also my journey. Women's rights, you can't talk about human rights without talking about women's rights.
Yeah.
And now, specifically, I do quite a lot, mainly sexual violence, but also sexual and reproductive health rights.
Right.
That's what we do at Adult Rape Clinic. So this is me. In broadly, that's why I call myself a development practitioner.
Yes. I would like to spend a day with you just to see how your day is. Because that sounds very busy. We are talking today about sex and consent.
Yes.
Which is a big topic, and most people don't really understand what consent is. And that is why we have Memory here today, so she can explain to us what is consent.
Well, consent is my favorite topic, and it is also our favorite topic, especially at ARC. Why? Because this is what we do on a daily basis. Whether it's the morning, it's afternoon, or it's in the middle of the night. And most of the time, consent has not been observed.
Right.
Or someone have revoked consent, and someone did not understand that, I have not been given consent. So let me start by explaining what consent is.
Please.
Consent is permission, specifically sexual consent, because consent in general is permission to do something, giving someone permission to do something. And most importantly, understanding that you have either been given consent, yes, or no.
Or denied the consent.
Yes, that's the important part, where someone then that have asked for consent understands that I've been given consent or I have not been given consent. So sexual consent is when I have given someone permission to have a sexual activity with them.
Is this verbal or body language?
Yes.
What is it?
Good question. Consent can be verbal. Consent can be, well,
like show it with your body.
Language.
Like my actions need to match what I'm saying.
Yes, will then show you that someone, especially if it's, you have said, can I kiss you? You know?
Would you ask for a kiss really? Like for me, just coming close, the moment you're like 90%, I'm like, okay, he wants to kiss, and I'm already in there. So would you ask for permission to kiss someone?
You have to.
You have to?
You have to, actually. We have to learn a culture of consent. I know you then start talking about, but then that kills the mood. It's not romantic. It's supposed to flow. But also, when we talk about sexual violence, that's when the lines are blurred, and then someone comes forward and say, but I really didn't consent. I really didn't feel comfortable. So if it's any sexual activity, you need to be sure. It needs to be safe. We need to talk about consent more often. We should actually have a consent culture, where then when you normalize things, because you have normalized that someone can just kiss you, you can also normalize someone asking you for consent. Because then the problem is, but then she didn't specifically say no, but she kept her mouth closed. She was trying to move away. She was pushing you away. Those are signs like that someone really doesn't want.
But can someone get away with saying, but I didn't hear him or her say no, and this could and just stick to pushing away and looking away, or just like not saying anything, but my body. Take for instance, persons with disability. The way they're going to show consent, they can't really say no if they're not able to talk, or if they're blind, or if they're deaf, or in a wheelchair. They can't really go to certain extents that able-bodied people can. So wouldn't that also then count as consent, like my body language counting as consent?
But how do they communicate? How if someone is either deaf, how do you communicate with them on a daily basis? If they say
sign
they
language,
want water, can you also then sign? And then that is also a form of giving consent. If they are sign language, and someone then can say yes or no with consent. And when you talked about the body language, interestingly, I was even thinking about if someone has a disability, they don't have arms, for example. Perhaps they can't really push you away. They haven't really verbalized that no, but they have done, other body languages that actually
the eyes
then show. So when we're talking about sexual consent, the encouragement is always, let's make it also romantic. Outside the explicit yes or no, can I, there are also, bedroom conversation. If you're in a relationship, you can understand what I'm talking about. If you're in a relationship, you know your person.
Right.
When they are doing this, well, really, I'm really hitting it. I'm like, they're really enjoying, a person. And when they are acting different,
then you're like,
something is wrong. Because sex and any sexual activity should be fun, should be mutual, should be enjoyed by both partners, honestly speaking. It always puzzles my mind when cases come at ARC that someone really enjoyed for a good 5 minutes with the person that was pushing them away, with the person that was trying to run away. what it ceases to be sex, it's now sexual assault. So you know your person, and there's certain words that you use, you know, your languages, your safe words that you can introduce, then that you know what, when someone has given consent, that can we make out? That doesn't necessarily mean that someone has also given consent that there should be sexual penetration. So that is what is also important.
So there's make out and then there's sexual penetration. Yes, we can make out, but I don't want that. But you see, now that drives especially men crazy. Like, why would you let me get to this point and now I can't pass the toll gate? Like, what's happening? I drove all the way, and now I want to pay for the toll gate.
Yeah,
You're telling me toll gate
and
closed.
you're accused of leading a person on. You know,
yes.
Like, but why did you let this happen to this extent? Now we are naked, and you're saying no. But at the core of sexual consent is body autonomy. Your body is yours. It is yours. His body is his. People need to understand that. I can change my mind anytime. You can change your mind anytime. Consent is not ongoing. Consent is not, we had sex yesterday, so we can just continue today. It is asked more frequently, and every time you have to ask consent.
How often is every time, memory? Because I'm picturing married couples. So every time when my husband wants to sleep with me, he has to ask permission? Or like you mentioned, because Tino Zirana, I know what his body is saying when he does this, and he knows what my body is saying when I do certain things. So in a relationship where people are married with my partner, am I always supposed to ask? And who is asking for the consent?
Anyone. It's either, you know, depending on the relationship, the other can always ask. Whoever wants can ask for consent, either verbally, but most of the time it's your, you know your person. You're like, you know, come here. You start, you know, kissing your person. You hold their hand. There's, you know, that responsiveness that comes with your partner. But then when there isn't any response, there's definitely something wrong. You're not really at that level that you're not. So people tend to really try to complicate it, that should I really always be asking, can we have sex now? Can we not? Even those physical responses will tell you that my partner is in the mood, or my partner is not in the mood. Marriage, you spoke about marriage. It's the most controversial one, with the understanding that someone has paid lobola. And it's assumed, right? It comes with the
package.
With the package,
yes.
It's almost understood when you get married, the consent is ongoing and perpetual. When it comes to sex, you can't say no.
Yes, you can't say no. You are going to give it to me.
But let me tell you, even in a court of law, the criminal code, section 68, I think, it also gives reasons or excuses where one cannot excuse themselves of, but this person is my spouse. If the other spouse, the other partner says, but I didn't consent to this. I didn't consent to the, oral. I didn't consent to this type of sex, There are different types, because others you're trying to, you're doing anal, you're doing oral, you're doing vaginal. Then you say, no, but I consented to vaginal sex. Then when it went to oral and anal, I didn't consent.
Okay, so before we go on to our next part, at what point do you then, as the partner who has had their consent rejected, like you mentioned the anal, the oral, I said yes, I gave consent to vaginal, but then now this man was going down on me. I don't know who complained about that, but now I have this man doing anal. I didn't consent for that. Do you go when it has happened already? Because I'm thinking, if you allowed it to happen, then you go and report.
So body responses when you are being assaulted are different. People are different. Others flight, others run, really completely fight. And you can even then see when they come in and say, I said no. You can even see the bruises, everything.
Right.
They get into that mode to protect themselves. But others freeze. You freeze and you have no idea. You are shocked that this is happening to me and this is my partner that is doing this to me, and I've explicitly said no. So you freeze. You are just, you just lie there because of either sometimes there's this risk of life or harm. Then your body just tells you, just pretend that you're dead.
Wow. All right, I'm going to
Yes.
hold that next part. When we come back, we continue to speak to Memory about sex and consent. But while we are on this break, I need you to just remember the first scenario I gave. What do you think should happen? How should this couple in particular, simmer down the situation? We'll be back.
Check it out.
So on Twitter, a month ago, there was a very interesting conversation, because most of the time when we talk about sexual assault or sexual violence, we are thinking men to women.
Yeah.
But this was really interesting, and it went on for days, I think, and a week, where men came out sharing their experiences in terms of their sexual debut was with their domestic helpers. And these domestic helpers, young boys as young
kill someone.
8 years old, and this helper is said to be maybe 23, 25,
Right.
20, 30, some even 40, when they were sharing that these women were really older, and they would make them perform all types of sexual acts when these young boys we still really didn't know what was happening.
Right.
And in terms of implications, some even shared that it has actually affected them in terms of how they relate with women.
Oh, wow.
Another guy shared that he now is into older women. Generally,
Because
that's
of
his-
that.
Yes, he attributes that because of that violation that happened to him when he was young, where someone was supposed to protect that person. And we'll get to the age of consent. In Zimbabwe, it's 16 years. You cannot have sex or have any sexual
That was
activity
actually the next question.
with
Like, what
anyone,
is the age
yes,
of
that
consent?
is below the age of 16. Whether they have said yes, they are actually initiating the sexual activities.
If they're below
you
that age.
cannot. If you are above that age, you cannot. Mainly why? Because of, we are also appreciating, in terms of understanding and appreciating sexual activities, they are not yet mature and they are not yet there. So what was happening when these people came forward, what I realized was they actually faced trauma in their lives, and some have been, yes, some others were also even testifying that have been in therapy for this certain amount of time. Some had just begun, some had, this is my first time talking about this. There's another guy who actually said it was my mom's friend. It was my mom's friend.
That's that's a little bit
Yes.
disturbing, because it now seems like it's issues where it's people that you know
Yes.
who will actually initiate these incidences. Memory, I'm going to ask you a question. Like at the beginning of the show, I gave a scenario about your partner giving you a call and you going over. So obviously, because he called you to come to his house or her house, they're obviously expecting some form of, action to happen.
Some quality time.
Some quality time. Now,
Yeah.
another scenario is where these non-consensual sexual actions happen, therefore we term rape, happen where they are planned. And then this man comes out to be the savior of the day. And obviously, because you want to be out of that situation, you're going to then give of your body to this person. Example is boyfriend, girlfriend, partner decides to take you on a holiday. say the beautiful Nyanga, you know, just weekend away with Bay, right? And obviously he's expecting certain things to be going down when you're in Nyanga. You're not there to look at the trees and climb
Maybe
mountains.
you're also expecting certain things.
Yes, okay, so maybe we're both
expecting
some form of action to happen. And then something happens while we're at that trip. And then now I don't want anymore. In those cases, what happens when consent is in question?
Well, we always encourage that you should really say, no, I'm not in the mood of doing this. Like you said, so many things happen. Number one, perhaps my body has, just changed. It's really become so complicated for me to start explaining to my partner. Maybe, number one, I've just had my period, or I'm about to, I feel bloated. You're a woman, it's terrible and awful. You're just getting into that, and you really don't feel like it. Then number two, perhaps you have this, it's hot, you have had this thrush, and you don't really feel comfortable and be like, no, my man cannot, see me like this. And you actually may be thinking, I'm protecting him. I just need to deal with this when I get back home. Or there has been some incidents where you saw some evidence that this person is also having relationship with others or unprotected sex with other people. Then now you're fearful of even your health. You don't want any more. The other party has every right to say, you know what, no, I'm just not in the mood. I've just switched off. But then the other part, like you said, it's expected. They are really expecting. We have planned this for a year. We have saved up.
Yes, so prepare yourself.
And sometimes there will be even sex texting happening and say, when we get there, baby. And it's assumed that, the consent was already there. And the people will be actually, no, here's the evidence. We're talking about this, how we will be even doing this. I'll push you at the corner there and I'll do this to you. Yes. What should happen? I will still emphasize that make consent sexy in your relationship. People always pretend like they don't know. When your partner has suddenly changed their mood, their behavior, it's not as, we are no longer touchy as we were before. Even the bed, if we kind of chirarataka, those positions, there is now a
gap
distance
and a pillow in between.
Yes, no one wants to be touched, or you'll be like, it's hot. There's already that body language and signs and messages that, something is
What
wrong.
of cases like men who are turned on by aggressiveness? Kune vamwe varume vekuti kana pepe paunenge uchirwisa kuti no handisikuda kani usadaro. Some men get turned on by that. Then they get into this wrestle, almost like a chikudo thing. And then
but someone has already said handisikuda.
But pamwe urukuda, because we've gone all this way and I advance. Wambondikisa, wambondibata. Yes, no, I want to enter. Now you're telling me I want this good. It has so. I know some women who have just ended up just letting go.
Just do it.
Yes, just do it.
Just do it. So what I said was before about I'm consenting to a certain sexual activity. Yes, I'm consenting to have sex with you, but I'm not consenting to aggressive sex. Where when by the time it's finished, everything, I can even feel that there's something wrong with my womb. I'm not consenting to that.
Okay.
And that's why in your relationship, it's also important to introduce safe words. It's also important to have that conversation. There is nothing so sweet like having consensual sex, guys, where the other party is responsive. It's good. What's exciting about having sex, rough sex, where the other party is not consenting? And it's almost amounts to sexual violence or rape. Honestly, you're having this sex and this person is unresponsive. What's exciting and sweet about it? It's bonderunonaka tawirirana. And munu wese achinya so achinyaso, responsive, kana chiri chikapa uchinyaso chipiwa,
yeah.
you can actually see that, my person is responsive. My guy is even going down, on me. Because tese trikuita say we are in this frame of mind that tabvumirana, and I know what you like. That's why it's also important in a relationship, even marriages, to talk about. So how do you want it?
Yes.
What are your sports? How do you like it? Do you like it harder? Do you like it? Others will say, no, it's nice and slow.
So does this consent then happen during the sexual act? Let's say I'm having sex with my husband and I want him to go a little bit harder. Do I then just say it like that?
Yeah, you tell him harder.
Harder, baby.
Yes. In a very nice tone, whatever, the way you like it.
But during the act?
Yes, during the act you can always. And during the act you can also say, no, slow down. That's also communicating the boundaries and the, consent and boundaries go hand to hand. That's also, and sometimes even there are places that makes you uncomfortable. When a person touches your ear, others don't even, want you to go down there with your mouth.
Yes.
Then
should you respect those? Especially like
you should respect
you
that.
mentioned with men that with young boys, their debut into sexual actions happened with women that were older than them. What if with your husband, you touch him in a certain place and he goes, should I pay attention to that? But I've heard men like being touched here.
But as his body freezes and I've gone to uncharted or unwanted territories where I want to touch. But I thought his body is now not responsive and yes, auto freeze. And if it's an erection, it's now down.
Oh,
to disappear. To disappear. So it's also those body languages that tells you that, yes, no matter what you read, what people are different has told you that, but men like this. It's also important. Night, baby. Well, I had if I do this and this. We always read it on social media pages and like, let me buy my horse, let me buy my cock, let me do one. And then when you go home, it's zero. It'll be like, my horse, why you say? A person will be asking you, but what is this? People are different. Then there are others said, my response was a classic response, what I got from my man. So it's really important to also understand that people are different. What a certain woman wants is not what another woman wants. Vice versa with men also. And continuing to do that, you have crossed the boundary and there is no consent. And remember, that person can really wake up and say my consent was violated and report you to the police.
All right. So where can I get help? Say my consent has been violated. Are there organizations outside, from reporting to the police? Where can I go if I feel like my consent has been violated?
Number one, you can come to ARC, Adult Rape Clinic. We offer post-rape services to survivors of sexual assault. So you can come to Ward C9 Parinyatwa Hospital, where we can either talk to you. First of all, we really appreciate, we call people that come in survivors because we understand and appreciate the courage that comes with it. Because we're talking about this, some of these things become so complicated and you're even blaming yourself. Am I not overreacting when you're walking to ARC? So we call them survivors because they are really brave. And our role is bear witness to their pain. Then we want to understand them and really believe them. We believe everyone. If you come to ARC, we believe you, we support you, and you shouldn't blame yourself. If you feel that you have been violated, I haven't given consent, it means you have been violated. Right. Don't second guess yourself. So you can come to ARC Ward C9. We also have offices at, we have satellite clinics in Kadoma, Gokwe
all right.
and Mashingo,
Right.
where you can access our services. There are also many other organizations that work within the victim-friendly system that deal with sexual assault and also gender-based violence. There is Musasa Project. There is Zimbabwe Women Lawyers Association that can even give you legal advice. Sometimes when it's marriages, you also then feel perhaps there is so much to lose in terms of your assets and all that. Perhaps it will lead to divorce if I come out and say my spouse has raped me.
Right.
Society will really be harsh on me. Will I not lose my kids? Will I not lose my money, my assets and all that? You can also go directly to the police. But accessing all these services, other services that I talked about, either at Musasa, Swala, and many other organizations that offer these services, you don't necessarily need a police report, because we also understand that sometimes you do not want to make a police report. You just want, for example, we didn't talk about this thing, where I have consented to have protected sex. And whilst we are in the act, the other person removes the condom.
That happens a lot.
That's sexual assault, yes. Then the other person removes the condom. Means my consent was protected sex. Then you have taken away my consent by knowingly having unprotected sex with me. So someone then just wants to come within 72 hours to prevent HIV, to prevent unwanted pregnancies, and also treat maybe possible STIs, because you're having protected sex with this person because perhaps you don't know your statuses and you'd rather stick to protected sex for several reasons. So you can still access services without a police report. You don't need to stress about it, and all these services are given in confidence, and you can receive ongoing psychosocial therapy as long as you needed it. We talked about boys that are still in therapy because of how they were introduced to sex at a very young age.
I would be traumatized if someone did that to me. That was Memory Kadau talking about sex and consent. Remember, it is probably like a difficult thing to talk about, and for any human being to be seen as someone who's not in control of their own body and just allowed someone to do what they wanted. But you can still find help, and you can still find someone to talk to. She mentioned the adult help clinic. She also mentioned police. She mentioned
Zimbabwe Women Lawyers Association,
and Masasa Project. You can go to all these organizations and get help. This is the Naked Truth Show, where we talk all things sex, sexuality, and health. Today we covered sex and consent. So after these, please get consent and seek consent. It's allowed. Bye.
And consent is sexy.
And consent is sexy. Say it loud. Say it loud.
Check it out.
Consent is sexy.
Consent is sexy.